Kia ora te whānau, no mai hoki mai anō for the last session of the day. I'm particularly excited about how we're going to be finishing up the day today, and that is of course with a conversation with someone that absolutely needs no introduction, which is why I brought him up on the stage straight away, because he's no stranger to any of you, and the format that we're going to deploy here for a conversation with Pic is that rather than a keynote speech, we agreed earlier that we'll sit and have a conversation. We'll have a corridor about the topic we've been talking about today, which of course is innovation in action, which means I've got pages and pages of questions that I've always wanted to ask Pic, and it's the perfect opportunity to do so. But first I want to confess that Ali and myself and the team have been harbouring a secret all day, which is that we spent most of today thinking that this session wasn't going to happen at all, and that is because Pic is of course based mostly out in Maraho and the road's closed, and so we accepted this morning that amongst all the disruptions that we had faced at the conference already today, that last session with Pic was unfortunately probably not going to work out. But as is characteristic of the man that I'm about to interview, he didn't accept that answer, and I believe on record there is a text exchange between him and Ali where she was encouraging him to go home and he was trucking on, and so somehow Pic's made it, had an epic adventure through the road closures and things from Maraho during today's weather event to be with us today, and we're extremely grateful for him to do that and to have the opportunity to have this conversation. So please, will you join me in giving Picot a round of applause as I join him for this conversation. Kia ora, Pic.
Kia ora, Johnny.
How was the trip over?
It was exciting, but actually due credit needs to go to my mate Blackie, my driver. Blackie, put your hand up. He's quite shy, but put your head up, Blackie. Hey, Blackie did all the driving, and he went through. We went through water that high. My handbag's soaking wet, so was sitting on the floor. I won't be doing that again. But so that's where credit's due.
We're really glad you made it because that whole last session for the afternoon, I wasn't sure whether we were going to be finishing the conference on a high note, having a one-on-one conversation with you, which I've been looking forward to, or whether we'll be finishing the conference early. So this is a remarkably good outcome, I thought.
Wonderful.
When Pic arrived, I took him over to get mic'd up, and I have on my notes here that I wanted to acknowledge the loss of your dog Fido, who would usually expect to be with you today. But one of the sound guys beat me to it with a question which was, have you still got your dog? Your answer was, I've still got him, he's just dead.
Yeah. And they asked me on the plane, have you got your dog with you? And I said, well, that would be terribly inappropriate because he is dead. So they understanding, very understanding.
I am sorry to hear about the loss of Fido, though. That was
well, he was 13 and a half, and the dogs start getting old very quickly. No, unlike guys like you and me. Well, me. No. Sorry.
Right, I'm going to start by admitting my own faux pas on this one. So I'm clutching a copy of your book here, Pic Adventures in Sailing, Business and Love. How old is this book now? It's a couple of years old now.
We launched it just before lockdown, so 2020.
Well, my younger brother Jasper, who's friends with Louis and who you know, he gave me a copy of this once to thank me for having him over the summer, which I thought was very nice, before I realised he'd been staying at your place in Maraho, so he'd probably just taken it off the shelf. It was an unusual gift, I thought, actually. But I have to admit, at that stage, I was just at peak Pic. It was when you'd just done the ASB campaign, I think.
Oh, right.
And you were at a lot of bus stops and a lot of billboards. Yeah. And I felt like I'd seen and heard a lot of you. And so I cast this book to the side.
Right.
But I got it out. I'd had enough. I'd hit Pic. But I got it out recently and I started reading it. And I was a little bit slow through it. And then the other day, older brother, when I mentioned I've got it before Friday, I've got to read this book cover to cover, and I'm not very good at focusing, and I've got to get through this book because I want to read it before we have this conversation. And he said, and it relates to the topic today, Why are you bothering doing that? There's a website, Open Book PDF. You can go there, you can pull the whole PDF of the book down, pull out some highlights and get some questions and things. I thought, shit, that's perfect.
No.
That's exactly what I'm going to do.
These are AI-generated questions.
That's exactly what I'm going to do. So right up until yesterday afternoon, I was heading to this website, which I did as the last part of my prep yesterday afternoon, and your book's not on there.
What we're, oh no.
It's not on there, which is a good thing, because it's plagiarised.
Yeah, good.
And it's a good thing. So I brought it on Kindle, and realised you can't download Kindle, and so I was unable to feed your book into AI to get questions for today.
Well, I will not respond with AI-generated answers.
Which means you might have to fill in some gaps, but I stayed up quite late last night and woke up early this morning reading this book, and it's really good.
I was hoping you would come to this.
It's
Johnny,
really
so
good.
Thank you.
And it was fitting that I opened it up because the foreword is written by Rod Oram, and Rod is someone to think about quite a bit during Aspire because, of course, he was an MC a couple of times, I think at least.
He was an amazing man.
He's an amazing man who, of course, tragically passed away. But I thought it was a fitting opportunity to draw from the book to call on part of Rod's foreword. I've just got this part. He said, for the opening of his second factory, with characteristic optimism, he invited Prince William and the Duchess of Cambridge to open it on their visit to New Zealand. And sure enough, they turned up with their baby George to do so. I didn't know that happened. Tell us that story.
No. It was one. Of course, they were in the South Island, and there was a day when they weren't having any appearances, and it happened to be the day we were opening. So I dropped them a line, and lo and behold, they turned up. And I forgot until the last minute they had a baby with them, so I was able to furnish them with a couple of tea towels wrapped around a couple of big jars of peanut butter, and what's her name? Di carried the thing in under her arm and looked very authentic. She did well.
I wanted to highlight that as an example because I think that's how we've all become accustomed to knowing you as what a big influence on your business career and your entrepreneurship is being cheeky or having these radical or different ideas. And so this talk was meant to be called Innovation in Action, and I changed it to Radical Entrepreneurship. But I was curious, do you think you're radical?
More mischievous. I think mischievous would have to be. I have been tempted to blow up the odd petrol station, but I sort of never quite know how that would be accepted. But so I like to do things that aren't, somebody would be upset. Somebody would think, oh, my business is ruined, but robot petrol stations, nobody. Anyway, enough of that. Sorry, NPD. But just sort of pushing stuff a bit. And I mean, at Maraha, the house is at the end of the street, and I've painted a tennis court on the road, and painting on desecrating the council roads and things, but it's wonderful, and people go down there, play tennis on it, and that's doing things that are a bit naughty, but nice, and not going to hurt anyone. So
being naughty but nice. I wanted to, I guess, take us back with this audience. I said to you when we had a very short briefing beforehand, the opportunity today in this conversation is this is an audience that actually knows you really well.
Yeah, they know all my jokes.
They know you. They know all your jokes. They know the story. We've heard a lot about Pic's peanut butter over the years, and I don't really think we need to focus in on that. But so let's start. I want to start with the reference you just made, which is Maraho. Maraho is obviously a special place for you. Tell us about the projects you've got going on there with your wetlands.
So when I was during lockdown, I was out at Maraho, and we were still making peanut butter as an essential service, and I felt I should really be sitting in the office and jollying people along and just sort of waving the flag. But it was clear I wasn't wanted because all I was going to be doing was passing on infections if I should pick up an infection. So I moved out to Maraho, and I felt awfully guilty about being there while everyone was at work and being in this wonderful place, and people were at work wondering whether they're going to die of some hideous virus. And but I stayed out there, and I really, really liked it. And I thought when there were no cars there, I thought what an amazing opportunity for Maraho to declare itself the only carless village in New Zealand. And And so I suggested this in the Nelson Mail. Somebody did a little story on that, and I figured out where there'd be a possible car park on the edge of town, and we could have buses and bicycles and things. And anyway, I got a whole lot of hideous bloody messages from about 100 people saying, oh, anyway. But in the meantime, I spotted this bit of land. This is quite a long story. Spotted this bit of land on the edge of town that I thought would do as a car park, and the guy who owned it was sort of hoping to rezone it for a outdoor pursuit centre, but it was rural land. He didn't manage to do it, and I went and I really love planting trees out there on my block. I've got 1,000 square metres in Marra in the New Haven subdivision, and I made him an offer on this block of land. He sold it to me, and so it's about 12 acres, and it's wetland that's had fill dumped on it for the last 50 years. And Keith Knapp had moved an old batch, it was known as Rollo's batch, moved it down from the Sounds, and plonked it there. And so I bought this land with this old batch. This was sitting there with no lining on it, and basic, very, it was pretty rough. And I started planting trees and fiddling around with the batch, built a big shed, bought a tractor and a digger, a yellow digger, and I got to really like it, and so my thoughts, because I've already had a batch around the corner, a place around the corner to stay in, I thought I would. The place had bunks in it and everything, and Rollo had been a very gregarious person, and lots of people had stayed there. Trampers and things had stayed there. And I thought this would be a lovely thing to continue to do, and to make this available as a sort of retreat, sort of a weekend place for groups to get together and things like that. So that's my plan. In the meantime, I'm having so much fun sort of fiddling around with it and planting trees and diddlying it up that I really don't want anybody staying there. Not yet, but sooner or later it will come. And that's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm really digging, planting trees, and just watch. It's nothing like watching a tree grow to make you feel you're going to live forever. Not that I need to live forever, but it's such a positive thing. It's a bit like, I can see nothing bad about it. It's like feeding people peanut butter. Planting trees is a worthwhile
One and the
thing.
same, is it?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I lose a bit of touch with the vision of how many people we're going to have there. I built a stage so we can have events out there. So anybody looking at bringing famous bands over, and we're going to have a bit of a blast out on my back porch. It's a beautiful back porch. And so that's what I'm doing these days. Is my place at Maraho.
I'd forgotten about the suggestion of making Maraho car free. I forgot that was the initiator of it. I remembered, you reminded me when you said it, that I came and had a coffee with you at Maraho when we launched. Well, we were setting up the Maraho Pledge with the tourism operators there, and I remember everyone thought it'd be a brilliant idea to get Pic involved, as is often the case. Let's go and talk to Pic, and he lives in Maraho, and would love to have him as an ambassador for it. And I thought, oh cool, we'll go and have a chat. We had a coffee together, and I remember saying to you that, look, the tourism operators, they're open to ideas around sustainability. They're looking for options, they're looking for ideas. And your idea, do you remember this?
Get rid of the car parks.
No.
No?
It was, why don't people pedal the boats up to the park?
Oh, yeah,
And I remember thinking, oh shit, okay,
Yeah.
no, maybe they're not as open. So that was the first thing, and actually you changed the whole way I looked at that project, because suddenly we'd reach for all the obvious things, and I was thinking, here's something that I would have never ever thought of. So do you not think that makes you radical? You don't feel that these ideas are radical?
I don't remember that so much, but. No, it's just. I mean, it's a fairly. People go there to experience the outdoors. And the idea that you're going to chuck themselves into a speeding boat with a 500 horsepower motor on the back and go blasting up the park and jump out on the beach, take photos, and come back. It's sort of And there's Maraho, this beautiful. Endless sandbanks and things that you can be completely alone out there, and there's the tourists rushing up to sit on the beach and take photos in the famous place, and we just pass by, what this amazing beauty that's right on your doorstep there. So
Yeah, I wonder then if the word radical doesn't resonate with you. Do you consider yourself progressive, and has a progressive disposition kind of influenced your business career, or was that something that came later, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's to do with thinking differently. I mean, I think we have a tendency when we're looking at starting a business to rush around and look at what similar businesses do and how they do it and what they do and what a proper label looks like and where you need to be selling your thing and all that kind of stuff. And if you actually think about it a bit more, I think you can come up with far better ways of doing things than everybody else is doing.
And would you say, Picot, that's what's driven you? Is it the ideas and the realising of thinking and seeing things differently?
Yeah, I think, and like having like fun with stuff. I think just watching what appeals to me and thinking, well, this has got to appeal to other people, and the terror of being boring. I really don't want to bore anyone. Let me know if I'm boring you.
Terrified of being bored. Not at all. Not at all. Well, I just want to ask you, because we had a session earlier with Jansen Madsen, who's a 27-year-old.
I've heard of him, yeah.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. And a lot of the things he said are things that you also talk about as well. He's willing to take risks. He's willing to give things a go. He tries not to overthink them. And I was thinking he was kind of disregarding of the idea of success, or at least self-deprecating about the success that he had had. And I was thinking, I remember you've talked about you don't believe in success because it seems too final or finished. Like, tell us a bit more about that. What do you believe?
So I suppose you've got success and you've got failure. And as I was saying before, I've had people come for an interview and say, well, we want to hear about your failures and what you learned from that sort of thing. And so success and failure are the same thing. But I think I really struggled to think about failures. I thought, I spent weeks agonising about what failures I'd had, and I couldn't think of anything. And then I thought, well, actually, what is a failure? And a failure can be nothing. You do what you do, and if you're happy with your life as it is, everything has been perfect. Everything has been a success, and I don't think we have failures. I don't think we make mistakes. We do what we do, and we become what we are. And if that failure had worked out something differently, we have no idea where we'd be. Same with success. If you hadn't had that success, maybe something else marvelous would have happened. And, it's just it's.
I love that.
It's a mysterious thing, but
so if we reject the idea of successes and failures, what about contending with obstacles? Like the one that I want to ask you about is the impact of losing your sight, and tell us about that experience.
So I have macular degeneration, which affects my central vision, and it was detected in my 20s because my mum had it, so I went and got checked for it. And it means that I can't, if I look straight ahead, which is where you do your focusing, which allows you to do fine recognition of stuff, it doesn't work. But I have peripheral vision, so I don't generally bump into things. And it became problematic maybe 15 years ago. I was finding it harder and harder to read. I read my last book about 20 years ago, and I stopped driving 10, 15 years ago. And it has been, I had to give up my boat too, so I could no longer, I had to stop the sailing school. I'll give you the stand. Everybody's heard this joke. So when I could no longer be sure of finding the marina at the end of the lesson, I gave up the sailing school. So, but that was sort of how it happened, and then I started making the peanut butter because I could do that without sort of needing to see too much. But for me, it's been annoying. It's annoying sometimes. I can't write. I managed to write the book 7 or 8 years ago, and I could still get a cursor to where I wanted to delete stuff from, but I can't do that anymore, and that's annoying. And it's also annoying that I couldn't take a boat out overnight or away anywhere interesting. But I think, but then I've got a lot of, I've been recollecting woodworking machinery, and I like woodworking. I've got a digger, and that's cool stuff like that. And but I think, the pleasure in doing stuff comes from solving the problems around it, like just making making something, and because I can no longer use a tape measure or a level, I have to think of ways of doing stuff that's going to work out reasonably okay, and it's figuring out the solution to that provides the pleasure. I think it's identifying a challenge and overcoming it. I think is where you get satisfaction from doing stuff, and I think that's I still. There's still heaps of satisfaction available from lots of challenges and things to overcome. So.
There's one specific thing that I read you've said, which is that losing your sight made you a better leader. In what sense did it make you a better leader?
So I did an ice house course quite a while ago now, maybe 10 years ago, and I realised that the other guys on my courses, who were all owner-managers, were spending a hell of a lot of their time just sort of organising people, and I realised that what my eyesight changes had done for me had forced me to delegate, and so that it was difficult for me initially to have anybody else do anything, because I was so good at every damn thing I did, and nobody else could do it as well. But other people would do stuff, and they would do it differently, and that would annoy me. But then eventually, when I couldn't do that, I couldn't look over someone's shoulder and say, what's that $40 on that? Who spent that? And you couldn't do that, and you have to actually trust people. And I think, if you trust people, people rise to it. It's when you start not trusting people that I think, that they'll start taking the piss. And I really believe, I think we have a phenomenal team at Pix, and I think a lot has to do with giving them that trust and believing that people can do the things that you want them to do, and they do. I think
I'm really pleased you raised trust, because that's where I wanted to go to next. Trust has been coming up all day. So we've been talking about artificial intelligence and the pace of change being stronger than ever, faster than ever before, and the extent to which these things are running away on us, right? And trust and ethics and values have been threaded through just about every talk today. And I read here that you said the more you trust people, the more trustworthy they become, which sounds, I think, is a really admirable position in the way you talked about trust before. But you've had a lot of experience in business. What happens when someone becomes untrustworthy? You must have had bad experiences with people too, or are you generally optimistic about people?
I'm very optimistic, but I realise there are times when you need to part ways with people you've been working with, and I'm awful at that. I mean, my default position if somebody does a bad job is to look as disappointed as I possibly can when I hand them their money, and then I ask them, does that include GST? That sort of thing, and give them their money and look very disappointed, which is terrible. I hate myself for that. But I'm now happy to delegate that sort of thing.
So you're someone who's you don't like conflict and
I
confrontation?
hate conflict. And
how have you navigated that, being an entrepreneur?
I've got other people
to do the conflict for you.
Do the dirty work. Yeah. So I've been very lucky with people who are prepared to, and I can't, I'm hopeless at being clear with people about my expectations and tell them how they're doing, and I know it's a very important part of managing people, but I have had, initially Stu, who was amazing at that, and latterly Amy, who's very good at, being clear with people and being respected and being able to do the tough stuff too, which... Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that. I want to go into a couple of we talked about Maraho and the wetlands there in the swamp, which I understand is where Fido is. You've told me as well. That's where we can find Fido. I want to ask you about the projects that are energising you at the moment, and your relationship with Pix, because you're still on the road. You've just come back from the food show in Sydney.
Yep.
So what's keeping you busy? What's keeping you energised? And how's that transition been?
So I'm selling down my interest in Pix. We've got a partner that's a major food distributor, but they're very low key. They're Australian based, an Italian family owned company, and they've taken half the company, and over the next couple of years they'll be taking over the rest of it. And I've been very happy about that. It's it's not what your question was, but I was, you know, I'd always been excited about the idea of having a family-owned business, and that's all very nice. But actually, when you look at it, I mean, when I was doing the ice house things, and we met people who had family farms, and they were dealing with the huge pressures of, oh, your grandfather owned this, oh, you can't, you know, you've got to, you know, and there's other siblings who, you know, it just, but I think that really you know, a company is not who owns it. I think it involves who's there, the people that are involved, and as far as family go, Louis over here. Where are you, Lou? Good on you, mate. But, and Louis got an interest outside of PICS, and you know the shares in PICS can be transferred into shares in anything else really, and they can support my kids or the community efforts that I'm interested in.
So tell us about those then, in terms of your, since you've been taken more of a champion or ambassador role with PICS in recent years. So you've got all sorts of other things going on. You've got growing peanuts in Northland. You've got the food factory going on as well. Tell us about some of these things.
Yeah, so the peanut growing has been a very interesting thing, because it's something I'd always thought would be wonderful if we could source our peanuts locally, because it seemed a really weird thing to be hauling peanuts in from the other side of the world and bringing them to Nelson and bringing jars from other countries and bringing them down here and then sending them off around the place again. So we got some funding from MB to do some trials of growing peanuts in Northland. And that was wonderful. So we were dealing with iwi groups in Northland Inc. and farmers. And I really, really loved that. We put in, we had a sort of half a dozen plots of up to a hectare each in different parts of Northland over 3 years, and we had scientists there and farmers and tribal groups. That was a lovely thing to be involved with, and we ascertained that it was easy to grow peanuts. We could certainly grow them. We could grow them as pretty much as well as anywhere else in the world, but the scalability of it is tricky, you know, to get people to haul out 1,000 hectares of kumara one year and plant peanuts the next year and then have something to do with them. It's very tricky.
So even just that as an example, coming back to my question around what motivates you. So you said that it seemed awfully silly that you had to import peanuts rather than grow them locally. A lot of people might think that in their business. Very few would start growing peanuts for the first time in Northland or go on a trial. So what is it about you, do you think, that inspires you or gives you the confidence, and I have seen it referred to as dumb confidence, which you disowned that quote earlier when I asked you about it, but the confidence to just give something like that a go, to take a risk like that, and rather than ignoring the problem?
Yeah, well, I mean, we managed to convince MB, you know, that it would be a good thing to do, I think, and that was, and they put the money in. I mean, I don't think we could have funded it ourselves, but MB had access to the scientists, and so I guess it was just being a sort of a catalyst to do this, and you know, and with the peanut butter having such a profile, and which was knocked off on me, it has given me the ability to people listen to me. You know, I don't know why it is. I'm just the same guy as I was 20 years ago, but sort of people sort of listen to sort of stuff. And it was the same with the food factory. You know, I was really keen to set up something like our Pāneo workshops, which we had a shared workshop in Auckland, and it was the most amazing place to work. And I thought when I came to Nelson, I wanted to replicate this. But then we got the peanut butter thing going, and I thought, well, we could do a shared sort of a cooperative food space where people could work on their food products. And so that was the idea behind the food factory. And I think, you know, because people were listening to me by then, you know, I was able to say, here's a good idea. And the government, the Provincial Growth Fund, stumped up with, you know, $750,000 to fit this building out. So I was blown away by that. And so we have this magnificent facility out the back of Peanut Butter World with the 4 commercial kitchens where people can, and deep good equipment and what have you, and food safe, where people can, you know, get their food products going.
Tell us about your experiences with the food factory, because you got the grant and you had the idea, and as you said, you were the right person with the right idea. No one else could have got that off. tell us, well,
Yep.
sorry, no one else was listening maybe, was that what it was? But tell us about the experience of what you've learned through the food factory and where it stands now. And I think just as a bit of a segue for me into understanding your passion and relationship for this place too, specifically
Right.
doing it from Nelson.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the food factory, we opened it just before COVID, so it pretty much was sort of closed down for 6 months after it opened, and we reopened it. We've got 4 kitchens there, and they're all 50 square metre kitchens with all the gear in them. Currently, we've got 2 of them let, and the other ones are sitting empty. So it's costing money.
Yeah.
We'd love to be able to get some funding to help with it. We've got we had some good assistance from NBS and currently Keytrax are helping us out. They're a social media and website designers, which have been fantastic. But and then we've been applying for grants for various projects that we can have in there, like cooking demonstrations and showing people how to prepare meals on a budget and things like that. So so we've been working with some of the pub charities and stuff to.
And do you think with the food factory concept, you said you're inspired by your experiences with the Parnell workshops, but you've grown and maintained a determination for Pic's to be a product that's now synonymous with Nelson, and the food factory is something you committed here. Tell us about your relationship to this place and what the potential you see, or what's always drawn you to Nelson and to feed and contribute to this place.
Yeah, well. I mean, I am acutely aware that when I started making peanut butter in the garage and selling it at the market, and the support that I got from the community, it was just so powerful. And when I sat down and thought, okay, there's 70,000 people in the top of the south, and there's Te Torohau, and there's 7 million people in New Zealand, however many in New Zealand, and we're selling this many peanut butter.
Yes,
selling this much peanut butter. If we sold it in the rest of the country, we'd be selling. I thought, oh my God Almighty! And I thought, oh well, maybe if we, because we're not well known, we'd sell half as much there. And anyway, it was boggling. The support we had locally, regionally, was just so strong. And I'm acutely aware that if we had started this in the back of Penrose in Auckland or something, we would be nothing, But being in a smaller community where we have the opportunity to be recognised, and I mean I used to get on planes and I'd find people beside me would be carrying a jar of peanut butter instead of a bottle of wine as a gift for their friends in Christchurch, and it happened time and time again. And I'm so aware that having this base, this rock from which to operate, and to have the ability to provide jobs, for the people I'm living with, the people in my community. It's just such a good thing, I can make it a better place for me to live in. I mean, it's not because I want. Well, I want to live in somewhere, where people are getting on, people are happy, and so anything I can do to give that a nudge, it's sheer self-interest. But it's I love Nelson, and I think Nelson's been amazing for us. So
I can completely relate to that. I always say when people ask about why we chose to stay in Nelson, and I always say it's because Nelson's been so good to us. It's actually the community that's fed our opportunities and things through that. I'm going to get to the audience questions because I know they will have, with the time we've got left, I want to make sure I cover some of the questions that will have come through. But there's a few words that we've been talking about a bit today, and a few concepts, and I just wanted to get your take on them before I move on. The first one is, which I mentioned earlier, is innovation. What does innovation mean to you?
Well, I think it just means not just doing stuff the way everyone else does it because that's the way they do it. I think it's just avoiding trying to do things the proper way. Just doing things the way you think might be interesting.
Tell us a bit more about that.
Well, I watch what I like, you know. I mean, I got this thing about this jar of shampoo in the shower, somebody else's shower, and it was green stuff, and it was called, and I tried something, and it smelled like mint, it smelled like mint sauce, but it was, no, I thought that's interesting. And then I looked at the label, instead of saying, sort of forest mint with all the flavours of freshly picked blah, with the aromas and bloody, it just said Bob's shampoo. It smells like mint sauce. And I felt such affection for this thing. It's like if you picked up a bottle of shampoo and I haven't you, try this. It has all the fresh aroma of forest mint, blah. If I would say to try this, it smells like mint sauce, but it's really nice, And that's what I would say to you as a friend.
Yeah.
And you would probably say that to me. And I felt such affection, peculiar affection for this bloody shampoo. And I thought, well, you could do this with anything. So that I tried to be very clear and to use the labels on the jar as a communication with people, not as a label. It's a label. It's just a way of talking to people.
I'll put a related word to you, and I've got one more before I go to people's questions, which is creativity. How do you feel about your relationship to creativity?
I used to. My daughters are both in marketing, and they would have teams, and they would have the creatives, and they would have the things. And I thought, this is really dumb, But actually, I think the world is full of people who have completely different skills, and some people are amazing at keeping stuff in order and organising things, and some people are good at sort of thinking up dumb stuff and being chaotic and doing something interesting, And I think we need to work together. I mean, honestly, each of these people need one of these people on the other side, and I think I think it's a sort of a. Yeah, I mean, I'm hopeless at budgets or strategic plans or anything, but just sort of mucking around and sort of thinking something,
That relates to the last word I want to put to you, which and I've got an example in mind really, because it's from previous talks I've heard and no doubt it's in your book when I get the chance to finish it. But you've always shared a lot of very personal stuff about your story. You've always been quite audacious, is a word that I would use. You've talked about mental health challenges and ending up in a psychiatric ward. You've talked about your entanglements with the Colorado drug gangs. You've talked about your previous... It's a really good book. Yeah. You've talked about, you're always telling about these adventures and sharing kind of all of yourself in your kind of public persona. And you've got quite a big public persona. And I think a lot of people in your position, with your kind of influence and awareness, would probably hide some of these stories. So why did you always choose to be so authentic, was the word that I was thinking?
I don't know if it's authentic. I think there's nothing wrong with vulnerability.
No.
And I think I'm blessed with the ability to cry and talk at the same time. And so if I get moved by something, I don't have to shut up. I can just keep going. Yes, and I think everything is story, The rest is bloody data and shit like that. So, and honestly, stories are hands down. That's what people are about, I think. So
very much relate to that. Yeah. That brings us perfectly to the first question from the audience as we wrap up here, which is, what lessons can you give us in terms of maintaining a positive mindset to push through challenges?
I think I have a very small understanding of depression. I mean, I know I have friends who suffered from depression, and I think I've been able to see how that could come to be, and I can see depression could be completely justified. I mean, there's plenty of stuff in the world that's really, enough to make you depressed with good reason. But it's a bit paralysing, and I think it's probably glib to say we just stay away from it, and just always look on the bright side. But I think somehow I've managed to always do that. I think so I think that's a thing of I don't want to say you have a choice, because I know that people who do get depressed really, really struggle with it. But I feel lucky enough to be able to choose.
There's a question, very specific question here, which is, as a brand new guardian of a gorgeous black lab, does Pic have any tips on how to keep her from totally taking over my life?
Ooh, so Fido came to me with 2 years of intensive training, and was the most well-behaved dog you could ever hope to see. I mean, I think he sort of lost a bit of that excellent behaviour when he was with me, and people say, "Oh, is he your best friend?" And I said, "Well, actually, he's a dog. My best friends are humans. But they are. Black Lab sounds lovely. I'd love to meet him sometime. Whoever you are, bring around for a play. Be great, or her."
Her, I think it was.
Her.
We've got a business-related question here from Marie, which is product diversity a way to keep business sustainable, but staying true to your kaupapa and uniqueness? Speak to that for a minute.
Business diversity, like a whole range of stuff. I don't know. I really, from my own perspective, I'm very keen to stick to my knitting. I mean, there are other peanut butter companies that keep chundering out a new variety every couple of weeks, and the supermarkets say, "Hey, what's new? Hey, well, great, we need something new. Give us what's it," and they put it on the shelves, and people buy it, and then next morning they have their proper peanut butter, and this fancy pants stuff with whatever it is, and it just sort of slowly moves to the back of the shelf until 2 years later you throw it away. And that seems very wasteful to me. But so I'm very happy. I'd be very happy just to make proper peanut butter for the rest of my days.
I'll put a related one from Sasha McDonald, which is asking, what advice would you give to other Kiwi entrepreneurs looking to innovate in the food industry?
I'll just make something. Don't muck around. Just go and make something. And the simpler the better, I think. And once you get it out there, I think the market will tell you what you need to do with it. People, if they say, "Oh, I like it, but it's a very small jar," and you might have your reasons for making it small, or people might say, "Oh, that's a really crap label. It doesn't look like." And so if you listen to your customers, you need to listen to your customers, I think, and that's the great thing about having something out there. Then people will start telling you what to do. But if you're just sitting there with a great idea in your head, you're never going to improve it on it. I don't think.
I've got a question for us to finish up on, I think, which is, you've said that you like to exceed what you think you can do, to go beyond the possibilities. So I'm thinking about the success that you've had. We don't use the word success, but I think about your legacy and your journey. We talk about those projects you've got going on, with even just the world as it is now and where you are now. What's left that you think you can't do, or that you're reaching for, that feels out of touch at the moment? Is that and has that changed at all for you?
Well, I don't quite know what the swamp's going to develop into, but I have friends who are confident it's going to turn into something really amazing. I'm wanting to have it as a venue and things, and it's still a bit of a murky sort of idea. But it's in my head there. And I know that I'm just going to get sidetracked by various things, but then I'm confident that the original intention will shine through and will flower into the, And I mean, I had this with the charter guide. I wanted to charter my boat, and I started this directory of charter boats, and in order to find out what was the best way of how I might make a living with a chartering, doing sailing, and I got so sidetracked with the charter guide, and I had such a good time with it. It wasn't until later when I thought, a sailing school would be a really good thing, and that came back to what this original intention was, and that allowed me to develop this whole sailing school idea, which was very satisfying and has evolved into an industry that's going on in New Zealand, the sailing school business.
So has it always been that way for you? Have you ever gone in with a clearly defined plan and seen it through, or have you always let it unravel?
Well, the peanut butter was quite unique, because I thought I'd do the peanut butter, and I actually sat down and made a budget. and I'd spent 10 grand. So I thought, I'm going to spend $10,000. I'm going to buy a concrete mixer with a burner underneath it that I can cook the peanuts in, and half a ton of peanuts for $1,000 or something in sacks, and a grinder, and for $500, and then some jars. And that's going to cost me $10,000, and I'll be able to make 50 jars of peanut butter a week. So I actually had a budget for that, and I thought, yeah. So I actually did have focus on that.
Worked out pretty well.
It worked out all right. Yeah,
Did go pretty well.
yeah.
Right, just in finishing up, you've shared so many great ideas with us through this conversation, and many, I think, the level of resonance or similarity to listening to Janssen Marsden this morning as a 27-year-old entrepreneur in a completely different, operating in a totally different world, making peanut butter to making games. So many of the same ideas. I guess just for the audience today, as I mentioned to you at the outset, we've had a lot of information and there's a lot of pressure and change occurring at the moment, and there's a lot of excitement about those opportunities. But what's your sort of parting words, I guess, for the audience, or advice from today? A deep dive around innovation and the change that's occurring. What's some wisdom that you want to impart on the audience as we wrap up?
Well, I think you need if you think about doing something, you need to just do something, and make sure you have fun doing it. I think fun is the key. If it's not going to be fun, I don't think it's worth doing. And you can squeeze fun into. I'm sure you can squeeze fun into anything. If anybody out there is having trouble, squeezing fun into what they're doing, maybe come and have a chat, and we'll see what we can do. But
there'll be an opportunity to do exactly that very shortly.